In this audiovisual presentation, we will talk about the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law of 1988. This law was made to help landless farmers and farm workers have a chance to own the land they work on. It was a big step in solving land problems that have been present in our country for many years. Before I proceed, let me introduce myself. I am Labiko Princess Aliyah Rose D. During the time of President Marcos, there were already laws about land reform, but they were not fully successful. Many farmers still didn't have their own land, and rich landlords continued to control large areas. Because of these weaknesses, the government passed a new law in 1988, which is the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law. This law aimed to give farmers ownership of the land and improve their quality of life. Now, let's come to the salient features of Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law, RA number 6657. The Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law covers all agricultural lands, no matter what crops are planted or who works there. It recognizes landless farmers and farm workers as beneficiaries and gives them support services like training, farm inputs, and financial help. It also allows different types of arrangements such as leasehold and profit sharing, where farmers can benefit from the income of the land even before they fully own it. To make sure all issues are handled fairly, the law created a special adjudication body to settle land disputes. Example for this is when a group of coconut farmers in Quezon Province received portions of land from a big plantation. The government also provided tools and seedlings to help them start managing the farm on their own. Now let's come to agrarian reform. Agrarian reform means the redistribution of lands to farmers and farm workers, regardless of crops or tenure status. It also includes programs that improve the economic and social well-being of the beneficiaries through production, profit sharing, and fair distribution of land benefits. For instance, a farmer who used to earn only a small amount as a tenant can now earn more and send his children to school once he becomes a landowner under the program. Agricultural land refers to areas used mainly for planting and farming, such as rice fields, vegetable gardens, and coconut plantations. It does not include areas used for mining, housing, or commercial purposes. Example: if a piece of land is used for planting rice in Nueva Ecija, it is considered agricultural land. But if the same land is turned into subdivision, it is no longer covered by the Agrarian Reform Law. And now let's move to the lands covered by the law. The Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law covers all public and private agricultural lands in the Philippines, regardless of the crops planted, the type of tenurial arrangement, or who manages the land. This means that both government and privately owned lands used or suitable for agriculture are included in the program. First, we have alienable and disposable lands of the public domain. These are lands owned by the government that can legally be used for agriculture. However, forest and mineral lands cannot be turned into agricultural lands unless Congress approves it to protect the environment and maintain balance in land use. For instance, a piece of government land in a rural area that is not forest or mining land can be distributed to farmers for planting rice or corn. Second, the law includes lands of the public domain in excess of the limits set by Congress. This means that large portions of government-owned lands that go beyond what is legally allowed can also be used for agrarian reform purposes. Example: if the government owns a huge piece of unused land that exceeds the limit for public use, a portion of it can be given to qualified farmers. Third, all government-owned lands devoted to or suitable for agriculture are also covered. These include lands owned by government agencies that are suitable for planting but are not being used. Example: an idle government research farm or unused agricultural area managed by a state university can be distributed to farmer beneficiaries. Lastly, the law also covers private agricultural lands. These are privately owned farmlands that are used for or can be used for agriculture, like lands planted with rice, sugarcane, coconut, or corn. The law allows the redistribution of these lands to promote fairness and equal opportunity for all farmers. Example, a large sugarcane plantation owned by a single family in Negros can be distributed among the farmers who have been working there for years, giving them a chance to own the land they till.
Now let's talk about retention limits. So it is said here that no person may own or retain, directly or indirectly, any public or private agricultural land, the size of which shall vary according to factors governing a viable family-sized farm, such as commodity produced, terrain, infrastructure, and soil fertility as determined by the Presidential Agrarian Reform Council, created hereunder, but in no case shall retention by the landowner exceed 5 hectares. So this means that a landowner can keep a maximum of 5 hectares of agricultural land. So the actual size may depend on factors like soil fertility, terrain, and crops as decided by the Presidential Agrarian Reform Council. 3 hectares may be awarded to each child of the landowner, subject to the following qualifications. Number 1, that he is at least 15 years of age. And number 2, that he is actually tilling the land or directly managing the farm. So this means that each child of the landowner may receive up to 3 hectares, but only if they are 15 years old or above and are actually farming or managing the land. Landowners covered by Presidential Decree Number 27 may keep the areas they originally retained, and original homestead grantees or their direct heirs may also retain their homesteads as long as they continue to cultivate them. So landowners affected by the Presidential Decree 27 can retain the same land areas that were originally allowed to them under that decree. So people who received original homesteads from the government or their heirs can keep the land if they still own and cultivate it when this law was approved. So the landowner has the right to choose which compact or contiguous area to retain. So the landowner has the right to select which specific area to keep as long as the land is contiguous or compact and not scattered. So for example, a landowner with several lots can choose one connected portion, like one large 5-hectare block, instead of scattered smaller plots. If this retained area already has tenants or farmers working on it, those tenants have a choice. The first choice is to stay as a leaseholder. So the tenant can remain on the land and continue farming, but he will only be a leaseholder and will lose his right to receive land as a beneficiary under the Agrarian Reform Program. And the second choice is to move to another agricultural land. So if the tenant chooses to become a beneficiary of another piece of land, he will give up his lease rights on the land retained by the landowner. So the tenant must make this choice within 1 year after the landowner selects the area to retain. Next is the lands not covered by the law. So the first one is parks and wildlife areas. Areas reserved for public parks, wildlife habitats, or nature preservation are excluded from agrarian reform. These lands are protected for ecological and recreational use. Number 2. Forest reserves and reforestation areas. So forest zones and reforestation sites are exempt since they are meant for environmental protection and tree planting and not for farming. Number 3. Fish sanctuaries and breeding grounds. So areas dedicated to fish conservation, breeding, or aquatic ecosystem protection are not included under the law. For example, a government marine sanctuary is exempt because it supports aquatic biodiversity and not agriculture. Number 4. Watersheds and mangroves. So watersheds or water supply areas in mangrove forests that protect coastlines are excluded to preserve water sources and marine habitats. Number 5. The national defense areas. So properties used for military camps, training facilities, or defense purposes are not covered by agrarian reform. For example, The Camp Aguinaldo military base cannot be distributed since it serves defense operations. Number 6. School sites and campuses. So educational lands including campuses and school farms used for learning and research are exempt from the Act. So for example, an agricultural college's farm laboratory used for student training is not subject to land redistribution. Number 7. Seeds and seedlings research centers. So areas used for research, testing, or producing planting materials are excluded because they support agricultural development. Number 8. Church and religious sites. So lands used for religious worship such as churches, convents, and mosques are not covered by agrarian reform. So the land where a church and convent stand remains under religious ownership and cannot be redistributed. Number 9 is the communal burial grounds and cemeteries. So public and private cemeteries are excluded because they serve community and cultural purposes and not agriculture. Number 10 is the penal colonies and penal farms. So lands used as prisons or penal farms are exempt, especially those cultivated by inmates for their subsistence and rehabilitation. Number 11. Government and private research or quarantine centers. So facilities for scientific studies or quarantine operations are not included under agrarian reform. And number 12. Lands with 18% slope and over. So steep lands or over 18% slope are generally unsuitable for farming and thus exempt unless they have been developed for agriculture. For example, is a terraced farming. A mountain slope that's too steep for farming is exempt, but a developed terraced hillside may still be covered. Now let's move forward to determination of just compensation. So when the government acquires land under agrarian reform, it must pay the landowner a fair amount called just compensation. To determine this amount, several factors are considered. So number 1 is the cost of acquisition. This is how much the land originally cost when it was acquired by the owner. Next, current market value. So this is the present selling price of similar properties in the area. Nature of land. What kind of land it is. For example, agricultural, irrigated, or dry land. Actual use and income. So how much the land is currently used. For example, for rice, corn, or livestock, and how much income it generates. Next is the sworn valuation by the owner. So the owner's own declared estimate of how much the land is worth. And the tax declarations and government assessments. So the value recorded in government tax documents and by official assessors. So in addition to this, the law also takes into account of the social and economic contributions. So this is the effort and productivity added by farmers, farm workers, and government programs that improved or developed the land. Lastly is the non-payment of taxes or loans. So if the landowner failed to pay taxes or defaulted on government loans related to the land, this can lower the compensation amount. So for example, if a landowner's farm is being acquired for agrarian reform and the land was improved through government irrigation or made productive by farmers' hard work, the value of those improvements is considered part of the computation. However, if the landowner has not paid property taxes or owes a loan from a government bank, the unpaid amounts may be deducted from the total compensation.
Let us now move on to the qualified beneficiaries. So under CARP, not everyone can receive land. The program prioritizes those who actually work the soil, the landless residents of the same barangay or municipality where the land is located. There are 7 priorities for the qualified beneficiaries. First is agricultural lessees and sure tenants. So ito yung mga nangungupahan o nakikihati sa ani. Second is regular farm workers, or ito yung mga empleyado sa bukid na tuloy-tuloy ang trabaho. Third is seasonal farm workers, or ito yung mga nagtatrabaho lamang
tuwing anihan o taniman. Fourth is other farm workers or iba pang nagtatrabaho sa sakahan pero walang sariling lupa. Fifth is actual tillers or occupants of public lands or ito yung mismong nagbubungkal ng lupa ng gobyerno. Sixth is cooperatives o collectives ng mga nabanggit na benepisyo. And the last is others directly working on the land, but no qualified beneficiary may own more than 3 hectares of agricultural land. Next, we have award sellings for beneficiaries. May limitasyon din ang ipinagkaloob na lupa para maging patas sa lahat. Each beneficiary may be awarded up to 3 hectares of agricultural land. Pwede itong isang lote o hati-hating lupa basta't ang kabuuan ay hindi lalagpas sa 3 hektarya. The beneficiaries may opt for collective ownership such as co-ownership or farmers cooperative or some other form of collective organization. Sa ganitong paraan, mas madali nilang mapapamalaan ang lupa at ang ani habang nananatiling patas ang hatian ng karapatan sa lupa. But still provided that the collective ownership must not exceed the total limit multiplied by the number of members. And last, under the award sellings for beneficiaries, title to the property shall be issued in the name of the co-owners or the cooperative or other collective organization as the case may be. Hindi maaaring iisang pangalan lang ang ilagay ang titulo, dahil kung iisang pangalan lang ang nakalagay, siya lang ang opisyal na may-ari ng lupa sa mata ng batas. Mawawala o mababawasan ang karapatan ng iba pang tunay na kasapi o kasama na pagmamay-ari. Next is payment by beneficiaries. Lands awarded pursuant for this act shall be paid for by the beneficiaries. Land must be paid to the Land Bank of the Philippines in 30 annual payments at 6 interest per year. For the first 3 years, payments may be reduced, and for the first 5 years, annual payments cap not more than 5% of annual gross production established by the Department of Agrarian Reform. And if payments exceed 10% after 5 years, Land Bank of the Philippines may lower interest to make payments affordable. Next is transferability of awarded lands. So, beneficiaries cannot sell, transfer, or convey awarded lands except through hereditary succession to the government, to the Land Bank of the Philippines, and to other qualified beneficiaries. And this restriction lasts for 10 years. However, the children or spouse of the beneficiary have the right to repurchase the land within 2 years if sold to the government or Land Bank of the Philippines. The Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program is more than a law. It's a promise of equality and opportunity. By giving land to those who cultivate it, we build a nation where every farmer's hard work truly bears fruit. We should remember that true progress begins when every Filipino is given what they rightfully deserve: land to the landless, hope to the hardworking, and justice to the Filipino farmer.
Now let's move to the next topic, which is the support services to farmer beneficiaries. The Support Service Office under the Department of Agrarian Reform was created to make sure that farmers who received lands are given proper help and assistance. This is to help them succeed in farming and improve their lives. These services include irrigation facilities, especially for dry seasons, and infrastructure projects like roads and bridges to make farming easier. They also provide price support and guarantees for crops to help farmers earn a fair income. For instance, when farmers in a rural area need water for rice planting, the government builds irrigation canals so that they can plant even during summer. Other support services include giving credit or loans to small landowners and farmers organizations and financial assistance for small businesses in rural areas. They also train and assign agricultural extension workers to guide farmers in using new techniques and technologies. Example, when farmers want to buy seeds or fertilizers but have no money, they can apply for government credit to continue their production. In addition, the government conducts research and training to improve farming, helps identify markets for selling crops, and supports cooperative management among farmers. They also manage funding and operations to make sure all these programs are properly implemented. Example, farmers' cooperatives are trained to manage their harvest and find buyers for their products in nearby towns. Now, let's proceed to the next topic, which is support services to landowners. The government also provides help to landowners who are affected by the Agrarian Reform Program. They are given financial advice, bond conversion programs, and help in marketing government bonds to ensure that they are properly compensated. Example, a landowner whose land was distributed to farmers may receive land bank bonds, which they can convert or sell through financial institutions. Overall, both farmers and landowners receive assistance under the law, making agrarian reform fair, balanced, and sustainable for everyone involved.
Special areas of concern. First, subsistence fishing. Small fisher folk, including seaweed farmers, shall be assured of greater access to the utilization of water resources. Dito, binibigyan ng mas malaking access ang mga maliit na mangingisda at seaweed farmers sa paggamit ng yamang tubig upang kanilang magamit sa kanilang panghanap buhay. Second, logging and mining concessions. Subject to the requirement of a balanced ecology and conservation of water resources, suitable areas as determined by the Department of Environment and Natural Resources and logging, mining, and pasture areas shall be opened up for agrarian settlement, whose beneficiaries shall be required to undertake reforestation and conservation production methods. Subject to the existing laws, rules, and regulations, settlers and members of tribal communities shall be allowed to enjoy and exploit the products of the forest other than time with the logging concessions. Maaaring buksan ang angkop na lugar sa mga logging, mining, at pastulan bilang agrarian settlements. Kailangang magsagawa ang mga benepisyaryo at mga miyembro ng reforestation o conservation product methods na pinapayagan ang mga settlers at katutubo na makinabang sa produktong gubat na ayon sa batas. Third, sparsely occupied public agricultural lands. Agricultural lands of the public domain shall be surveyed, proclaimed, and developed as farm settlements for qualified landless people based on an organized program to ensure orderly and early development. Ang mga pampublikong lupang agrikultural na halos walang nakatira ay susurbihin at i-develop bilang farm settlements para sa mga kwalipikadong landless. Magkakaroon ng pantay-pantay na trato sa lahat ng settlers. Ang mga hindi ginagamit na lupa ay maaaring paupahan ng mahigit sa 15 taon sa may mga kakayahang mamuhunan. 4. Idled, abandoned, foreclosed, and sequestered lands. Foreclosed and sequestered land shall be planned for distribution as homelots and family-sized farmlots to equal occupants. If land areas permits, other landless families shall be accommodated in these lands. Ipamamahagi ang mga ito bilang homelots and family-sized farmlots sa mga akwal na naninirahan. Kung may sobra pa mang lupa, maaari ring bigyan ang ibang landless families. Rural women. All qualified women members of agricultural labor force trust be guaranteed and assured equal right to ownership of the land, equal shares of the farm's produce, and representation in advisory of appropriate decision-making bodies. Dapat tiyakin ang pantay na karapatan sa kababaihan sa pagmamay-ari ng lupa, kita sa ani at partisipasyon sa mga desisyon. Next, veterans and retirees. In accordance with the Section 7 of Article 16 of the Constitution, landless war veterans and veterans of military campaigns, their surviving spouse, and orphans, retirees of the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Integrated National Police, returnees, surrenders, and similar beneficiaries shall be given to consideration in the disposition of agricultural land of the public domain. Ang mga veterano at ang kanilang pamilya, mga retirado ng Armed Forces of the Philippines and Integrated National Police at iba pang katulad na grupo ay binibigyang prioridad ng gobyerno sa pamamahagi ng lupaing agrikultural. 7. Agricultural graduate of agricultural schools who are landless shall be assisted by the government through the DAR and their desire to own and till agricultural lands. Ang mga nagtapos ng kursong agriculture na walang sariling lupa ay tutulungan ng gobyerno sa pamamagitan ng DAR na makapagsaka at magkaroon ng sariling lupa. Ito ay bahagi ng layunin ng CARP na magbigay ng patas na oportunidad sa lupa para sa lahat ng kwalipikadong mamamayan. Prohibited acts and omissions. First, the ownership or possession for the purpose of circumventing the provision of this act of agricultural lands in excess of the total retention limits, or award ceilings by any person, natural or juridical, except those under collective ownership by farmer beneficiary. Pagmamay-ari o paghahawak ng sobra ng limitadong sukat ng lupang pansakahan upang takasan ang mga probisyon ng batas, maliban kung ito ay kolektibong pagmamay-ari ng beneficiaryo. Second, the forcible entry or illegal detainer by person who are not qualified beneficiary under this act to avail themselves of the right and benefits of the Agrarian Reform Program. Pursahang pagpasok o pananatili sa lupa ng mga taong hindi kwalipikadong benepisyaryo ng CARP. Third, the conversion by any landowner of his agricultural land into any non-agricultural use with intent to avoid the application of this act to his landholdings and to disposes his tenant farmers of the land tilled by them. Pagbabago ng gamit ng lupang pansakahan tungo sa di-pansakahan upang maiwasan ang saklaw ng batas at mapaalis ang mga magsasaka. Fourth, the willful prevention or obstruction by any person, associate, or entity the implementation of the CARP. Sinasadyang paghadlang o pagpigil sa pagpapatupad ng Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program. The sale, transfer, convenience, or change of the nature of land outside of urban centers and city limits, either in whole or in part after the effectivity of this act, the date of the registration of the deed of convenience in the Register of Deeds with respect to the title lands, and the date of the issuance of the task declaration to the transferee of the property with respect to unregistered purpose of this act. Pagbebenta o paglilipat o pagpapalit ng gamit ng mga lupang nasa labas ng urban centers o city limits pagkatapos maging epektibo ang batas upang maiwasan ang probisyon nito. The sale, transfer, or convenience by a beneficiary of the right to use or any other usufructuary right over the land he acquired by virtue of being beneficiary in order to circumvent the provision of this act. Pagbebenta o paglilipat ng karapatan sa paggamit ng lupa ng benepisyaryo upang takasan ang mga patakaran ng CARP.
And now, moving on to the flaws and loopholes of the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law of 1988. The goal of the law was to redistribute agricultural lands to landless farmers and farm workers. The law aims to promote social justice and industrialization by giving those who actually till the land a fair opportunity to own it. Sa madaling salita, ang layunin ng batas na ito na ipamahagi ang mga lupang agrikultural sa mga magsasakang tunay na nagbubungkal nito upang mabawasan ang kahirapan at mapabuti ang kabuhayan sa kanayunan. Ngunit sa kabila ng magandang layunin nito, marami itong kahinaan na naging hadlang sa ganap na tagumpay ng reformang pansakahan. The first flaw was it has limited coverage. The law excludes a long list of land types such as public lands for natural defense, penal farms, school sites, experimental farm stations, seed and seedling research, and pilot centers. Parks, wildlife, fish sanctuaries, breeding grounds, watersheds and mangroves, and land with 18% slope and over. It also includes private lands for church sites, non-tenanted rice and corn lands whose size are 7 hectares and below, and other croplands whose areas are equal to or less than 5 hectares, and homestead lands. Ano nga ba ang ibig sabihin nito? Ang batas ay may limitadong coverage. Hindi nito sakop ang mga lupang ginagamit para sa pambansang depensa, mga kulungan, paaralan, parke at iba pa. Hindi nito sakop ang pribadong lupang mas maliit sa 5 hektarya, ang mga taniman ng palay o mais na hindi umaabot sa 7 hektarya. Halimbawa, kung may isang pribadong lupain na 4 hektarya lamang, kahit na may magsasaka roon, hindi ito isasama sa reforma sa lupa. The provision which allows the landowners to reserve 3 hectares for their legal heirs defeats the redistribute intention of agrarian reform. The provision enables the landowners to exempt large portion of the lands if he or she have many children, or the provision only requires that the children are actually cultivating or directly managing the farm. Ibig sabihin nito na pinapayagan ng batas na ang mga may-ari ng lupa ay magtabi ng 3 hektarya bawat anak o tagapagmana. Ang problema, nagiging paraan ito ng mga mayayamang pamilya para makaiwas sa pamamahagi ng lupa. Halimbawa, kung may 10 anak ang isang hasyendo, maaaring nilang hati-hatiin ang lupa sa kanila upang hindi mapasailalim sa reforma. Number 3. Provisions favoring agricultural and 10-year time frame for implementation. The law provides some condition which would either accept the agribusiness plantations from land reform or would delay the implementation of this measure on cooperative and commercial farms. Among the provisions contributory to these purposes were non-land transfer through corporate stock sharing, the land reform deferment seen on new commercial farms, the unclear mechanics for identifying the beneficiaries in commercial and corporate farms, the establishment of profit-sharing schemes, vague land use conversion guidelines, and the 10 years time frame for implementation. Ibig sabihin nito na pabor ang mga agribusiness at 10 taong palugit. Ang batas ay nagbibigay ng 10 taon na palugit bago tuluyang ipatupad ang mga komersyal na sakahan at agribusiness. Dahil dito, maraming kumpanya ang nakaiwas o natagalan ang pagpapatupad. Isang halimbawa nito ay isang kumpanyang nagmamay-ari ng malaking taniman ng tubo ang nagsabing corporate farm sila, kaya nakaligtas sila mula sa pamamahagi ng lupa. The political influence and economic capability aggravated by the inefficient government bureaucracy allowed by landowners to give their lands to the longest possible time, if not covered by the last reform. Ibig sabihin, malaki ang impluwensya ng mga politiko at mayayamang pamilya. Dahil dito, mabagal ang pagpapatupad at madalas na pinoprotektahan ng gobyerno ang interes ng malalaking may-ari. Halimbawa, isang politiko na may malaking lupain ay nakaka-impluwensya sa mga opisyal upang hindi agad ipamahagi ang kanyang lupa. And we have number 5. In the determination of just compensation, some of the factors to be considered are just difficult to qualify, which causes delay on the distribution of lands. Such delay can either be intentional or unintentional. Ibig sabihin nito na mabagal at magulo sa pagpapasya ng kabayaran. Isa pang problema ay ang hindi maayos na pagtukoy ng just compensation o tamang kabayaran sa lupa. Dahil dito, natatagalan ang proseso ng pamamahagi ng lupa. Halimbawa, isang magsasaka ang naghihintay ng lupa pero hindi pa rin ito maibigay dahil hindi pa tapos ang usapan sa halaga ng kabayaran sa may-ari. Number 6. The large incongruity between the huge funds released as payment to the landowners and the low land revenues that will be generated from the beneficiaries. Ibig sabihin nito, malaki ang pondo, ngunit maliit ang epekto. Bagaman malaking pondo ang inilaan sa CARP, kakaunti lamang ang napakikinabangan dahil sa mabagal na proseso at mababang kita ng mga benepisyaryo. Halimbawa, bilyon-bilyong piso ang nagastos sa programa, pero marami pa rin ang magsasaka na walang sariling lupa. And then we have the number 7. Sincerity of some officials to implement the laws. President Aquino signed Execute number 229 that allows stock distribution option. Instead of land distribution, Hacienda Lucita recognized itself into a corporation and distributed stock to farmers, but real control and management remained in the lands of the family. This means that ang ilan ng mga opisyal ay hindi seryosong ipinapatupad ang batas. Halimbawa, narito ang stock distribution option sa Hacienda Lucita, kung saan sa halip na lupa, binigyan ng stocks ang mga magsasaka, pero nananatili pa rin sa pamilya ang kontrol. And then, sa halip na ibigay ang lupa, ginawa itong korporasyon at binigyan ng maliit na bahagi ang mga magsasaka. Number 8. Circumvention of the law by landlords by subdividing their land among family members instead of tenants and rural workers, selling the land to dummies and proxies, converting cropland to commercial and industrial uses to take advantage of the loopholes of the law, tying up the process in the courts, and engaging in outright physical resistance. Pinupoint out dito na ang pag-iwas ng mga landlord. Maraming may-ari ng lupa ang nakakahanap ng paraan upang maiwasan ang batas. Sila ay nagbebenta ng lupa sa mga walang modo at hinahati sa mga kamag-anak o ginagawang commercial land. Halimbawa, ang isang may-ari ng lupang sakahan ang nagbenta nito sa kanyang pamangkin para lang hindi mapasa sa Agrarian Reform. Sa kabuuan, ang Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law of 1988 ay mabuting layunin, ngunit ang mga butas at kakulangan sa pagpapatupad ang dahilan kung bakit hindi pa rin ganap ang naaabot ng tunay na reforma sa lupa ng Pilipinas. Ang tunay na reforma sa lupa ay mangyayari lamang kung magkakaroon ng tamang implementasyon at patas na katarungan para sa lahat ng magsasaka.
As we have seen, the Agrarian Reform Law does not only give land to the farmers but also gives them hope, support, and a better future. Through the different services and programs, both the farmers and landowners are given fair opportunities to grow and improve their lives.